Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at MedComms networking.com. So information services, resources, activities, and so on for people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, and associated businesses, so across the globe. So there's lots of information at medcoms networking.com. Specifically, have a look at NetworkPharma TV, where you'll find hundreds of videos, many of which are recordings of webinars like this, but there's a lot more there as well, on all sorts of topics around medcoms. Also, for those of you interested in getting a job in the business, have a look at firstmedcomsjob.com, where you'll find lots of information, careers guides, more videos, webinars, articles, and so on, which hopefully give you useful insights into the business and guidance and help you get that job, maybe as a medical writer, account manager, or whatever. So today, absolutely delighted, we're running a First MedComms Job webinar. So I guess primarily talking to those of you who want to come into the business about the sort of work we do and the sort of opportunities in a company like Performance.io. We've got the team from Performance.io with us today. So thanks very much, Tom and the team, for joining us. I'm going to hand over to you. We've got presentation Q&A. Those of you in the audience today, please send in your questions. But without further ado, Tom, I'm going to hand over to you.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Peter. And thank you again, everyone who's come along to listen or watching the recording later on. Hopefully this is a really informative session when thinking about career opportunities in the future. But we're going to keep this very orientated towards healthcare SEO and what we do. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to first have a little look at what is SEO. You might have seen this acronym around a lot and might not really understand what it means and how it relates back to MedComms, the wider business, healthcare. So I'll give you a little bit around that. Then kind of why should you care? So how does that relate back to actually getting the right content in front of doctors, patients, the general public? And then obviously why Performance.io? So why kind of think about opportunities that we have and working within this niche within the MedCom space. And we'll also have lots of opportunity for questions as well. So before we go into it, just want to give a brief introduction of who we've got on the line today. So I'm Tom Harrison. I am a content account director here at Performance.io, so I kind of head up our medical content offering. I did a degree in natural sciences, focused on biochemistry, and then have spent various years progressing through as a medical writer at a couple of different agencies before then moving into the niche of SEO at Performance.io. I'll pass you on to Isla.
It's nice to be here. Hello to everyone watching. But yeah, I'm Isla MacAskil and I'm an SEO content manager at Performance.io. So I started similarly to Tom, where I have a degree in anatomy, and then I moved on to a master's in science communication because I wanted to do something, as everyone always says, outside of the lab. And then after working as a copywriter in an area not to do with science, but to do with education, finally found myself at Performance.io, which sort of built on all those skills together in the same place. So, Max, now to you.
Thanks, Isla. Hello, everyone. Lovely to virtually meet you all. I'm Max. I'm an account manager at Performance.io. So I graduated from the University of Birmingham, studying economics. And I then started an internship followed by a rotation at Performance.io. So I've now been here for 2 years, which has absolutely flown by. And really, as an account manager, my role is being the key point of contact between my internal team and also the client. So really, I look after that day-to-day project management. So making sure the engagement runs smoothly, but also providing an optimal service and making sure that we're hitting strategic objectives of the client throughout. So yeah, that's me. Lovely to meet you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Max. And then before we go into kind of what is SEO, we just wanted to pull up, because you might have seen this tagline if you've been to our website already or had a look at some of our communications. This is kind of how we try to define our offering in as simple way as possible, but I wanted to break this down a little bit. So firstly, we define ourselves as a pure play SEO and performance agency. So by pure play, we mean that we purely operate just in this SEO space within healthcare marketing. So we don't do a million other different things for this type of client. We very much focus on SEO and have a large SEO and content team alongside our accounts and client services teams to make sure that we do that, and that is purely where we operate. Then obviously there's the SEO element, so that means again the work that we do is focused on getting our clients web content, whether it's branded, whether it's disease education, ranking as highly as possible on Google and other search engines for their target keywords. And then finally, performance, and this links back to, as we'll explore a bit later on, the data-driven aspect of how we operate. So the first thing we do is look at the data in terms of what people are searching for, and then we make sure that we're always keeping ourselves accountable by constantly looking at that data in terms of how our client sites are performing. So there's nowhere to hide in terms of whether we're actually doing a good job. And I'll hand you over to Isla to give us a bit more about what actually is SEO.
Thanks, Tom. And I think it's great given the context of who we are, but a lot of you might have been sat there and thinking, I don't know what SEO is, because it can be quite difficult. In our industry, we use a lot of acronyms and abbreviations, but often people don't know what's behind them. So if you move into the next slide, Tom. SEO actually stands for search engine optimization. So the definition, sort of, if you look on Google, ironically, is the process of getting a web page displayed highly in organic rankings of a search engine results page for chosen keywords. That's a lot of buzzwords for SEO geeks, but what does that actually mean? So when you type in a query or you want to find something, what do? You usually go to a search engine. You type that query in, press enter, and then what do you get? You get this page that's displayed on the right. So there's a lot of different factors that make up this page, but we call it a search engine results page. So quite simple, really. When we're talking about organic rankings, this is the list of pages that are displayed. So these are, the first one on the right is what is SEO by search engine land. So that would be the first page that's in the organic rankings. The reason we call it organic rather than anything else is because this is a natural landscape of the page. You often, when you type certain queries in, more sort of transactional queries, you'll see paid ads at the top. So this is a separate thing to what we deal with. This is paid advertising and this is paid ranking results, whether we only work with ones that are organic, so we don't pay to be there. When we talk about keywords, these are the queries that anyone is typing into a search engine. I think Tom's obviously added his own in at the bottom about Henry Cavill. But why this is so important is because this gives us an idea of what the language people are using to what the languages people are using to find the information that they want. So when more pharma companies think about their audience, they don't tend to think about what they're actually searching for. They think about what they think they're searching for. When we look at things like keywords and the queries from their audiences, we can actually tell them, actually, this is what your audience want, and this is the way they want it presented to them. So how do we make our pages come to the top of Google? How do we make sure that that organic ranking is number one from an associated keywords? Well, just to narrow it down, there's over 200 things we could do. But obviously some of them are more weighted than others. So when Google's algorithm is looking at how to establish the priority of pages, it looks at this whole plethora of factors. But importantly, I think the most salient thing for this call is content optimization. So a lot of medical content on the site, on a website, influences where it is positioned in that page ranking. So for any burgeoning MedComms writers out there, this is something that you should really consider working in, because if you want your content to be viewed or you want your content to be found by the right person, you need SEO. And Tom's going to go into a bit more why that's really important for the industry as a whole.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Isla. So that's a very high level view of SEO, what it is and what goes into how different web content ranks. But now the question is, why, if you're interested in medical communications, interested in healthcare, why should you care about all of that? And that's because Google is the #1 source of health information across the globe, which is unsurprising when you think about it in terms of, if you have a query about how you're feeling, different symptoms of a disease, you learn about a new treatment, the first thing that you do is go to Google to find the answer. And there are, in fact, actually over 1 billion health-related searches every day within Google. So that's a lot of people trying to look for the right information to answer their queries. And as well, if you kind of hone in on a particular therapy area, just as an example, if you look at oncology here, so within that kind of cancer treatment space, there are even just in this little niche over 50,000 searches a month just in the UK for oncology treatments. So, as someone who's creating content for the web, whether it's around a disease or around a treatment, if you're not thinking about your audience who are searching for that information through Google, then you're really missing a trick, because there's a huge amount of what could be relevant traffic, relevant audience for that kind of content. And it's not just the general public as well. You might think it's just people kind of Googling symptoms, looking at different treatments for conditions, but actually it's your kind of physicians, nurses, specialists within different areas who are also using it on a regular basis. I don't know if that's concerning or not, but in the 10 minutes before your GP appointment, your doctor is probably looking at your profile and doing a little Google to check what medication you're on, reminder of how it works, side effects, things like that, to refresh their memory. So it's really important that the results that they get in that time are quality content. And as you can see here, this is across a few different specialisms where almost just over a third of HCPs, healthcare professionals within these different specialisms are using Google, using search engines a few times a day, some up to 10 times or more every single day. And actually, if you just look on the right-hand side there of the total, you've got over 3/4 of these are using it at least a few times a day to get information that they need. So it's a consideration whether you're creating content for the general public, whether it's patients or whether it's healthcare professionals as well. So hugely relevant to the work that our clients do, because if they're creating content for the web, then they need to be thinking about what their audience is actually searching for and making sure to serve those queries. So I guess why Performance IO when you're looking for these graduate opportunities moving into this industry, and a big thing that links back to that performance piece at the start is the sort of data-driven approach that we have to content creation. If you've worked at a medical communications agency previously, you'll be used to receiving, a client strategy doc, core messaging, things like that, and use that as a basis for the content that you create. But what we try to do is ensure that our clients are getting a realistic view of what their audience is what kind of information their audience actually wants to see. So we will do that research, find what areas they're interested in, what aligns their strategy, and see what people are actually searching for, whether that's, you see a few examples here on the left-hand side, oncology treatments, side effects of certain drugs, causes of certain diseases, more information around drugs of different classes like JAK inhibitors here. But we give them all of that data and make sure that then the strategy that we implement for that website, the kind of content that we create, is then tailored to those searches. So as Isla said, you're not creating content based on what you think your audience might want to know. You're actually basing it on what your audience do want to know, whether that's, again, patients, caregivers, or healthcare professionals across different specialisms as well. And in terms of the opportunities specifically at Performance we give you a bit of a choose your own adventure option within our graduate scheme. So we run a twice yearly graduate scheme cohort where you'll have a period of time working across these different areas of the business. So content, accounts, and SEO. So we have a representative from each of those teams here today. But it means that you get exposure to a huge amount of the types of work that we do, whether that's content and it's kind of scientific research, medical copywriting, thinking more about that content strategy, whether it's more in that accounts and client services role of client relations, managing the day-to-day of a project, and managing those relationships and communications with those clients. Or if you're more interested in the SEO space, kind of digging into that data, thinking more about that strategy, the technical side of these websites and how Google judges that, doing that kind of detailed keyword research, then you'll get exposure to those sides of the business as well. So there's lots of opportunity to learn around all areas and then specialize within one of those areas based on what you're interested in, where you work the best, and your kind of ambitions going forward. So we thought we'd give you a little bit around what it's actually like to work at Performance.io. So we've got a few people obviously from different teams on the call today. So I thought we'd go around and just give a bit of high level, what we enjoy most about our current role, the biggest challenge as well, because we want to make sure you get an honest view of the industry and what the day-to-day of a job is like, and also then why they picked Performance.io. But you've heard quite a lot from me, so I'll go over to Max first, and then Isla, and then I'll come back and give my answers as well. So Max, we'll go over to you.
Sure, thank you, Tom. So what do I enjoy most about my role as an account manager? I'd probably say, and it sounds very cliche, but I would probably say that the people, I think, a huge aspect of my role is interaction with people, both my internal team, but also the clients. And I think, we have a great team in the UK, but also the US and India. And I think, you learn that people within your internal team have different ways of working. I think it's bringing that together with also the different types of clients you get. So, for example, you might have a client who is very sort of detail orientated. They want to get to grips with the nitty gritty side of things, or you might have some which, want to just understand the key takeaways and really what it means for them. So I think bringing that all together from your internal team to the client and being that key point of contact and navigating through that, I would say is what I enjoy the most about my role. In terms of the biggest challenge, I think, like with any service or consultancy industry, you're always going to get challenging clients. I think, more often than not, that's not a reflection of them, but it's, we understand that they're working in high pressure environments. They have, high targets to meet. So I think navigating through that and making sure that you can provide the best service possible when their requirements can be quite challenging and demanding. You might be putting in that extra hour, but it's all worth it in the end when, you get some nice feedback or you're driving optimal performance for them so then they can meet their targets. So it brings its challenges, but also enjoyable as well along the way. And why Performance.io? I think probably similar to what Tom said. I think, ultimately we are unique in what we do. I think we're quite proud of the fact that we stay in our lane and we specialize purely in SEO in healthcare. And I think it all makes it worth it when, you're presenting insights, whether it's, a clever bit of insight into how their online performance is presented that they're not aware of, or it's a piece of strategy which you're recommending to them to take on. And then when they're feeding back and saying, oh, actually, I've never looked at it that way, or that's really interesting, I've never seen that, then that makes it all worth it when you get some nice feedback. So it's presenting that expertise which backs everything you're saying. So that's probably why Performance.io. Isla, do you want to go up?
Yeah, I will. I've realised I didn't really explain what my job was at the start. So I'm an SEO content manager, which means predominantly I sit in the SEO team and deal with a lot of the data to then inform the content strategy, and then I'll sort of oversee some of the content that goes out and make sure it aligns with that initial insight from the data. And I guess what I enjoy the most about my role is and it's something that I thought that I was going to leave behind with my degree, but actually I've revisited it and still enjoy it, is sort of problem solving and looking at data. You know, I wanted to get out of the lab and do something creative, but actually I still feel warm doing things that are very data driven and diving into a spreadsheet. But additionally, it's a lot of lateral thinking, so there is that creativity there. There's never one solution to SEO, and there's never sort of a straight way forward. You've got to juggle things like brand priorities in what's best SEO wise to then come up with something that works on all fronts for both the search engine and for the users. So it's never if it's a simple solution, then I haven't found it yet, basically. And then the biggest challenge, although that can be challenging, is I think it's similar to Max in the sense of it's being able to communicate with clients how important SEO is. I think that can be sometimes a bit of a hindrance. You know, we're down in the trenches with the data and we know what needs to be changed, but it can be difficult communicating to clients when their brand strategies are completely opposite to that. You know, nobody wants to admit they need to change their whole strategy that they've been working on for months, but from our perspective, that's what we need to do. Being able to get some of the things we'd like to do on our site live can be very, very difficult, but if you find the right way to communicate and explain, hopefully it happens. And then wide performance IO, again, it's that wonderful mix of different things that it's hard to find in a role. So having creativity, having sort of more data-driven research, working with different nationalities and different languages for different kinds of sites. The world's basically out there for you to take any part if you wanted it at Performance IO, and in your role you can grow. And if you wanted to learn more about client communications or more about content, you'd definitely be able to sort of become more specialist in that area. But yeah, I feel like I've talked for a long time, so it's probably Tom up next.
No, thank you, Isla. That's really useful, and especially, you know, to get your insight into a role where you did that scientific degree, but then went into an area that I think a lot of people on the call might not have even considered as an option for them when they're thinking about their first career. Yeah, I guess in terms of my role, as I said, within the content team, so you know, we're focused around that content development as well as supporting the SEO team with those initial insights, doing some of that scientific research, and making sure that everything is accurate from that perspective as well. In terms of what I enjoy most, I think it's the sort of tangible outputs that you get when you talk to the client, in terms of, you know, we do this keyword research and then we present to the client the findings in terms of areas where there is opportunity that they can create content around, and actually seeing that come into action, seeing that almost kind of challenging their beliefs sometimes, in terms of what they thought they should focus around, especially when it comes to some more of the you know, disease education, disease awareness kind of content, where you're working to, you know, improve knowledge around a rare disease, or improve sign-ups to a clinical trial, or you know, the number of people getting immunization from a certain vaccine or things like that. You can quite clearly see the impact that you're making in terms of building this content, seeing more people go to these sites, and then seeing them actually take a clear action from there is very satisfying. In terms of the biggest challenge, I think because of the nature of SEO, it has to be, when you're thinking about it from a medical perspective as well, that sort of compliance aspects of things, you know, it's a problem across, always a difficult challenge across MedComms, but particularly when you're working in something like SEO, where the clients that you're working with might not necessarily know loads about it, how it all works. You're kind of already at the forefront of that area in terms of compliance, so there might not be detailed guidance around what you can and can't do. So it's always a challenge to work out exactly where that line is, what you can do with your clients, what you can target versus not, and make sure that they understand and their compliance teams understand as well how it all works, and we can advise on that as well. And then in terms of why Performance IO, I think being a small company, we only have about 100 people worldwide, is that you can, if you want to, get a kind of huge amount of responsibility and autonomy within the role. So, you come into a small team and you can very much define what you want to be doing, what you want to be focusing on. And if you have areas of interest that you want to explore and have a knack for it, then, your opinions are always listened to, and you can really change the direction that the business goes in, even kind of coming in at that entry level. There's not a kind of rigorous ladder in place and you're boxed into a certain role and you feel like no one's kind of listening to your opinions. Very much, you can see the CEO twice a week in the office, have a chat to him whenever you want, and make your ideas heard. So a good place to get in and progress quickly and learn a lot at the same time, I think. And just before we go into the Q&A, just wanted to highlight in terms of where you can find a bit more information about us. So website is obviously the key. So you can go to our main homepage to get more information about what we do. But then also, more specifically, if you're looking for opportunities, definitely go to our careers page on the website. Also very active on LinkedIn, so keep an eye on the posts that we're doing around job opportunities, careers events that we're attending, blog posts, things like that. And then I'm sure Max and Isla will reiterate that for any burning questions that you have, message us on LinkedIn or just send us an email directly, and we'll make sure to get back to you as well, whether that's just a question about our roles to help you learn a bit more about getting into the industry, or something a bit more specific about Performance IO and how we work. And from there we'll go into any questions.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. That was great. Super. Okay, we've lost the slides. Thank you very much. Okay, so just a shout out to the audience, please use the text boxes to send in any comments or questions or observations, and we'll have a chat for the next 10 minutes or so before we wrap it up. Couple of things. I think you did actually in put out some details in the end. I was going to start by asking you to just describe Performance IO a little bit more, but you talked, I think, in Max's and Tom's comments about the fact there's about 100 of you. I think you said, Tom, you're based in India. Is it India, US, and UK? I think you mentioned, Max. But just give us a little bit more of a flavour of the company. And I mean, obvious question: are there different roles in the different countries, or is it similar sorts of roles? Just give us a flavour, because we have got an international audience looking at this. So what are the opportunities around the world?
Yeah,
Tom,
sure.
I'm directing that at you, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So the company is now just around 5 years old, so still in that kind of startup to scale up phase. So that's why it started out within the UK. So it's where the UK team is currently the kind of biggest team that we have. But then we also have quite a large team out of India who do a lot of the data analysis, technical SEO, that sort of work as well. So work very closely with the SEO team for sure, but also the wider team as well. So we're always having calls with them around keyword research and things, and getting their thoughts. And then the US is obviously huge for pharma and opportunities for the business out there. So as we've grown, we've started getting more and more client opportunities based in the US. So then I've also started to build out a US based team. So at the moment we have account management, new business, and then also trying to grow SEO in the US as well to kind of help better serve those clients who are based out there. But we do also work with clients across the globe, whether you're in any three of those teams. And worth noting as well, for any animal health enthusiasts, that we do a lot of the work that we do is the kind of pharma work that you'd expect from MedComms, but we do also do some general consumer work, and then also we have a dedicated animal health division as well, which is run by Hannah Watson, our team, who is a veterinarian herself. So we do quite a lot of work in that space too, whether that's farm animal health, pets areas. So if you have a passion for that, then you can definitely do some work with those kind of clients too.
Okay. So look, in the course of this conversation, we'll probably talk a little bit more about Performance IO itself, and we've had a couple of questions just pop up, so we'll come back to those. But let's just go for the wider sort of SEO type business, as it were, and just help me understand a little bit. You've very much sort of gone SEO and Google, it's all the same thing, sort of thing. Do you want to comment on, I mean, there are other search engines. Do you want to sort of comment on the broader landscape, and how much do you as a company actually in practice worry about anything other than Google? You see what I mean? Isla, maybe is that one for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we always keep abreast of all the different search engines, because depending which market you're looking at, it depends, who uses what. Obviously, in China, Google's not as big, but interestingly as well, we pay a lot of attention to Bing. The NHS, they use Bing on their computers, so it's a really interesting way of seeing how much traffic might be coming from actual doctors. So it's also, and I dare to say it because it's unleashing a kind of worms, search engines are changing, and AI is obviously becoming more prevalent in everyone's thoughts around the subject. So we never just look at Google, although it takes most of the share. We always sort of are keeping everything else in mind and experimenting with it and looking at how we could optimize with different search engines for different needs. So yeah, we predominantly work with Google, but we don't ignore everything else. I think if that answers your question.
I guess I sort of want to go further than that, but I'm going to leave it at that. Okay, I just think it's important to certainly recognise there's other services out there, but and they work differently. So I suppose that one simple question. Let's just keep this simple, because let's not go too far into this. But when you're optimizing for SEO, it's not as simple as just going or is it? Optimizing a certain way for a certain search engine. I mean, by definition, there's options and there's so on, which is where it all gets very complicated. There's a simplicity about the way people talk about search engine optimization. And I've talked to writers over the years. Oh yes, I can write for SEO. What they mean is they take a page and they just chuck as many keywords in as possible. In the belief that the keyword that they think is a keyword is going to, I mean, that I've got very cross in the past about those sorts of conversations, and I know you're not taking that approach, but I think maybe it might help to understand a little bit better what that, am I being too simplistic or provocative or silly here? I just think a little bit more color on this would actually be useful for us.
So I think that's the old thought behind it, is that SEO is simply putting keywords in at certain places, and that means that you will rank well for it. It is more complicated than that, and that is an old way of thinking about it. In terms of, I suppose in my head, I think it very much of leveling up with things. So there are a lot of factors that inform SEO, but to start off with, having good content that's around the keyword topic, looking at the language your audience is using and using that kind of language as well. That's sort of the first thing you look at. Making your page look inviting to the user, making sure it's structured in a way that your user and Google can interpret it well. These are all sort of growing in difficulty, and then you've got a whole technical side behind that as well. So the way the pages are structured within a website, different coding that makes it easy for a Google bot to crawl the website and gives it different directives. And then there's another part of it outside of that that's more like off-page SEO, where having PR tactics and where your website is establishing links from can be influential as well. So it's difficult we could spend a whole day
talking
different aspects of SEO, but in terms of, there is a lot of things that writers on the internet or enthusiastic bloggers can do in terms of simple things with SEO. However, we wouldn't make any money if that was just it, basically.
But also it does. I mean, and again, how do I ask this question? So you do position yourself very clearly as the pure play SEO and performance agency, right? But a lot of what you do, unless I'm missing the point, I mean, with a client, you're probably reviewing what they're doing and advising what to do with what they're doing. You're not necessarily generating it from scratch. or are you? So if you, presumably there's a range of conversations. I know it's going to depend, but there's going to be situations where you go, well, I would be doing it this and in this way, and they're going to say, can you help? And you're going to go, yes, we can write. But there's a lot of situations, presumably, where you go, we're advising on the SEO aspects, but we're not dealing with the content. You know, there's another agency or provider or whatever. Again, just give me a sense of how that all works out in practice, because I could see that being interesting.
Yeah, so there is an ideal process, which is, we come in at the start of a project, the website isn't even built yet, and we take a look at, what their objectives are for that site, who they kind of want to go after, and then we can go through our whole process from scratch in terms of looking at the insight, seeing what people are searching for, seeing what other types of people are already ranking for, how their kind of content is structured, and then putting together kind of sitemap recommendations in terms of that. So we will kind of help direct that full structure of that website, and then we'll come along and my team will then actually do the research and develop the full copy for those pages ourselves, and then work with the client to kind of get those designed up in the way they want for their website. So we do often do that kind of almost end-to-end process up until that sort of copy development stage, but which is the ideal in terms of, that's what's going to get you the best performance. But obviously, as you say, there are clients who have had an agency of record that they've worked with for many years, who know their strategy very well, know their content very well. So then it does become a challenge of trying to provide those recommendations and provide that advice, but also work alongside. But we are, we're capable of doing that as well, and it does become more of that, providing those recommendations and then seeing how we can kind of fit in with the way that they work already. Can we create a few pieces of bespoke content ourselves that then they will help us put live, because we'll say, these are the ones that are going to get you the most performance, so please let us develop those, or else we can also do that reviewing of existing content, reviewing of manuscripts, providing advice on how to optimize the content, the structure, the technical elements behind that page as well. So yeah, definitely does become a little bit more tricky as more and more parties get involved. And the ideal is to take ownership of everything, but obviously, as you say, that doesn't always happen. So we have to do a bit of both.
Okay. Let's leave that one where it is. To come back to the graduate scheme, a couple of questions coming in about how it works in practice. I guess they're just asking for a little bit more detail, maybe from an account management point of view. Max, do you want to talk a bit from an account management point of view? Coming in, I think you came in as an intern, didn't you, Max? And then developed along the account management, right? Just give us a bit more of a sense of what happens. I mean, how much in-house training, and so on are you getting, and in what sort of ways, just to give people a feel for that aspect of the training program.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually came in as an intern. So I initially did a month's internship. So that was really just mainly ad hoc, just getting to grips with the company, how it works, and how I could support. And then following that was a 6-month rotation. So I actually did a couple of months in the content team, followed by the SEO team, and also business development and accounts. So that was 6 months. That was really valuable, to be honest. It really just meant that I could, understand how all the different areas of the business work together. But typically, if you were coming through accounts, you would then come through where I came through on that next stage, which was as an account executive. And really, if I was coming in just at that point, I wouldn't have known anything really about SEO, and that was fine. The training is pretty in depth around what SEO is, how it works, and how we need to convey to our clients the importance of it and how we do that. And there's a lot of training around how to communicate with clients effectively, in terms of delivering that expertise, but also professionalism in a professional way as well. And as an executive, it is more so that kind of support role in terms of project management, and supporting the wider team in making sure that the project runs smoothly, timely manner, making sure that we're organizing and forecasting for whether it's 12 months time and saying we're going to deliver this, then we're going to deliver the next sort of deliverable within a couple of months, etc., and just giving the client that optics on how that engagement is going to run for the next sort of 12 months. And then account manager really is taking on that sort of lead of being that key point of contact and really running the project from the top down. So yeah, that's how I would say the progression
and being a bit simplistic about it, but progressing beyond account manager, account director, or something, is a sort of fairly standard sort of development there. On the content side, would it be the same sort of idea? You do a bit of a sort of a induction, a bit of a circulate round to get the feel for the business, and then you'd be sort of concentrating on the content side, is it? And trained as a medical writer, I guess, in that way.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're trying to do with the grad scheme is give, it wouldn't just be a content grad scheme or accounts or SEO, is give people that exposure to all sides. So working within all of those teams within that first kind of 6 months, and then figuring out kind of where you want to specialize. But yeah, in terms of content, it would be, as a new company, we haven't had a decade of running this grad scheme and an iterative process to keep kind of learning and developing. So if you're looking for a super kind of rigid, detailed training, like step by step, everything graduate scheme, then I'd say it's not that. And if you want something that's a bit more flexible in terms of, you might decide a few weeks in, oh, I love the SEO side of things and I want to kind of commit my time to that. Then there's that opportunity. If you decide the same thing for accounts versus content, there's that opportunity. You can be a bit more flexible and you can easily get that exposure, work on certain projects and do the SEO side, the content side of that project, and then easily kind of see how those different parts of the business come together. I think that's, partly key is you're seeing all sides of it. So even when you specialize in a certain area, you have that knowledge then of the other teams and how they work, and that will help you kind of fast track a bit, I think, through a development. But we do still have, that core kind of competency framework for each team that you're regularly checked against to see how you're doing versus each level of the role, and then that then easily presents itself. Promotion,
sorry, I'm cutting in. Just practically speaking, do you have people with the title medical writer?
So we don't explicitly have medical writers. We have a slightly different role structure. We call them kind of content executives through to content manager, senior content manager. I think that's because we're trying to emphasize the slight difference of the role where you're not, you see medical writer and you think the kind of traditional, you're focused on Congress and pubs and areas like that, whereas even the kind of people within the content team here, that's kind of where the majority of the scientific expertise sits. So you'll be advising other teams on strategy of projects, you'll be looking at the keyword research, you'll be providing that kind of advice, so you won't just be writing content the whole time. You'll be providing your expertise to other areas as well. You get to go into the data a little bit more, present some of those bits to clients, learn more about sitemaps, other areas of how we put websites together too, and not just write the content essentially.
Yeah. So I think it's important to draw that out actually, because from my point of view, I was keen to talk to you guys because MedComms is a very broad church these days. It's not just about, if it ever was, medical writers sitting there writing publications for peer review publications. It was never really as simple as that. But there's a very broad church, and the sorts of work you do is quite different, albeit under that umbrella of MedComms type work, and the sorts of people who are interested in working with scientific content and communications and so on. It's just important that they see these different options and how the different sort of the different agencies work and so on. So I hope you're getting quite a useful insight from there. Isla, just to bring you in and maybe just to sort of finish off, but I mean from your point of view, again, just give us a sense of what's the career structure like for you within a company like Performance.io. Where do you go next?
Yeah, so all the departments are kind of set up very similarly. So, you can rise up in the ranks. I came in as a SEO content coordinator, so I was dealing a lot more with producing the products. And then I've moved up more into a manager role where it's thinking more about the strategy overarching those products that then go out to their client. And then sort of like Tom was saying, it's still, even how far you climb, there's always room to sort of go in different directions with it or make your own specialty. So, I sit as an SEO content manager. At the moment, we have other SEO managers. They're more technical. So depending which area of SEO you're favouring, you might be able to specialise in that. As we said, there's over 200 ranking factors for Google. So there's a lot to cover from, that perspective. And I think what's great, maybe what we were talking about earlier was very content focused, but in terms of what we do technically can be very challenging in pharma. So in terms of regulations and things like that. So there is a whole side of technical SEO where we're trying to get our pages visible in countries that have very strict marketing laws. Those skills, if you wanted to take them elsewhere, would be very, very valuable to any sort of marketing agency or anything like that, if that is within or without healthcare. So even though we're in a very niche position, the things we're doing and innovating is actually, has a high market value.
Yeah, I think one of the things I will have to wrap up now because we've gone over the time, but I didn't hear you say it quite like this, Tom, but in previous chats you've said something along the lines of, because you're the one who's of the three of you, you're the one that's got the sort of the more traditional MedComms background and you come into SEO sort of thing, so you can compare and contrast a little bit. And I think I'm probably not quite quoting you correctly, but a couple of times when I've talked to you and we've done the odd interview and whatever, and you've said something like, you became frustrated or you became aware that, or saw the importance of making sure that, this content you were working on would actually get seen by somebody. I'm not doing it as well as you've said it quite nicely a couple of times in the past, but that sort of idea, and in a business like MedComms, I mean, ultimately that is the point of the exercise, is to produce content that's actually seen by somebody. And this sort of SEO type work you're doing is clearly one way in which you make that happen. And it's I just always have heard you say that, and it's interesting that that's the motivation, as it were, that took you in this direction. Do you just want to finish on a final word and then we'll say bye?
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of why I've gone on this career path from working at more sort of all service agencies to then go into this niche, because you can find yourself working, particularly when it comes to like more global clients, working on PowerPoints, posters, emails, things like that, which you send to a client and that's ticked their box from in terms of achieving what they needed to do. But then you may never actually know who's seen that, whether it's gone anywhere, whether it's gone live. And I think that can be, a bit disappointing, particularly when you've put a lot of effort into it. Whereas, we see you work on a website, you work on the content, you then see that 6 months, 12 months down the line, however, go live, start getting traffic and start doing what you want. You get that kind of closed loop and get that reward of seeing your content actually come to life and see the data go, hopefully spiking up as you get more eyes on it over time as well, and the website crawls up those rankings. So yeah, quite satisfying.
Okay, right. Let's draw the line there. I know I can speak for all of you and say that anybody watching this, anyone today or watching the video later, can contact you guys. You'd love to hear from them. LinkedIn is an easy way, although you provided, I think, some email addresses and so on. But basically, LinkedIn is an easy way. So please do reach out to these guys. I know you'll be very happy to hear from each other. And if anybody wants to know what I'm doing, MedCommsNetworking.com is the easy place to start. But for today, I'd like to say a huge thanks to you guys at Performance.io. Thank you to the audience for joining in with your questions. But I'd just like to say goodbye, to stay safe and give us all a bit of a wave, everyone. Take care.